When a stagecoach rolled into Dusty Hollow that hot July afternoon, the whole town seemed to pause. The blacksmith stopped hammering, the preacher paused mid-sermon, and even the saloon girls leaned out their windows, fanning themselves as the dust cloud settled. Everyone was waiting to see the stranger who had come for the Callahan girl, the rancher's daughter who, rumors said, had sent away for a husband. From the coach stepped a tall, thin man in clothes that had seen better days. His boots were scuffed, his hat was faded, and his shirt bore more patches than fabric. He carried only a single satchel and an air of quiet endurance. The crowd whispered, some laughed, others pitied him. It wasn't every day that a mail-order husband arrived in rags. At the far end of the platform stood Clara Callahan, her father's broad-shouldered daughter, in a pale blue dress that matched her eyes. She was 25, practically a spinster by frontier standards, and had spent more time branding cattle than sewing dresses. But she had a good heart, a quick mind, and more courage than most men in Dusty Hollow. She'd placed the advertisement herself, though her father hadn't known until the letter came back. "Mr. Samuel Hayes?" she called, stepping forward, voice steady despite the murmurs. The stranger lifted his head, meeting her gaze with clear gray eyes that carried the weight of miles and hardship. He removed his hat. "That's me, ma'am. You must be Miss Callahan." She nodded once. "Welcome to Dusty Hollow." Her father, John Callahan, stood behind her with arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The richest rancher in 3 counties, he had little patience for drifters, and even less for men who showed up with holes in their boots. He gave the stranger a hard look. "You say you're here to marry my daughter?" Samuel met his eyes. "If she'll have me, sir." A hush fell over the platform. Clara squared her shoulders. "I sent for him, Pa. I will make my own choice." John Callahan grunted, said nothing, and turned on his heel toward the wagon. Clara gestured for Samuel to follow. As they rode toward the Callahan ranch, the sun dipped lower, stretching long shadows across the plains. Samuel sat beside her, silent, watching the horizon. He seemed more comfortable with the wind than with words. That night, at supper, the silence was thick as stew. Her father watched Samuel like a hawk, while the ranch hands whispered among themselves. The stranger ate politely, thanked Clara for the meal, and excused himself early. Clara found him later outside, sitting by the corral fence, mending a piece of rope with sure, practiced hands. "You're good with knots," she said. He smiled faintly. "Used to work the riverboats back east. Learned a thing or two about holding things together. Seems you've had a long road." He nodded. "Lost the river job when the company folded. Then the farm went under. My folks are gone, and my brother's family's all back in Kentucky. When I read your letter, I figured maybe God was giving me one more try." Clara studied him. The lamplight caught his features, tired but kind, worn but not broken. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "Neither are you," he said softly, and there was something in his tone that made her heart stir. Over the next weeks, Samuel proved himself in ways no one expected. He rose before dawn, worked till dusk, and never complained. When a storm tore down part of the barn roof, he was the first to climb up and fix it, hammering in the rain. When one of the calves went missing, he was out there before anyone else, bringing it home safe through the mud. The ranch hands stopped laughing. Even her father grudgingly began to nod when Samuel passed. Clara watched him from the porch sometimes, the way he treated the horses with patience, the way he spoke little but worked hard. He wasn't a man of many words, but every action of his seemed to speak for him. One evening, as they repaired a fence together, Clara glanced at him and said, "You don't talk much." He shrugged. "Never saw much use for talking when work's to be done." "But don't you ever miss company?" "Miss family." He tied the wire and looked up at her. "Sometimes. But then I think, maybe I'm where I'm meant to be now." Her heart beat faster than she wanted it to. They married quietly in the small church at the edge of town, with only the preacher, her father, and a few hands as witnesses. There was no grand celebration, no lace veil or orchestra. But when Samuel took her hand, he held it like something precious, something he would never take for granted. That night, under the wide Texas sky, Clara lay awake listening to the crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. She turned to him and whispered, "Do you ever wonder if this will work?" He reached for her hand. "Every day, but I reckon we'll make it work together." The days turned into months, and their marriage grew like a sturdy oak, slow, steady, unshaken by storms. Clara taught Samuel how to read the sky for weather, how to drive cattle, how to feel the land under his boots. In turn, he showed her quiet patience, how to mend leather, how to listen instead of rush. Then came the drought. The summer sun burned mercilessly, the grass turned to dust, and the creek beds dried up. The cattle grew thin, and her father's temper grew shorter. One evening, as they gathered around the table, John Callahan slammed his fist. "We're done for if the rain doesn't come soon. Half the herd's dead already." Samuel spoke softly. "There's water still in the lower valley. I saw the signs this morning. We could drive the herd down there." John snorted. "You don't know these lands like I do, boy. That valley's barren." "With respect, sir," Samuel said, "I've been watching the birds. They've been flying south and circling near that ridge. There's water there. I'm sure of it." Clara's eyes shone with quiet faith. "Let it try, Pa. We've got nothing to lose." John hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Fine. You lead the drive. But if you're wrong, don't bother coming back." The next morning, Samuel and Clara set out with a herd and 3 ranch hands. The sun blazed, the wind carried dust like fire, but Samuel kept them moving. His quiet confidence steadied everyone. When they reached the ridge 2 days later, he led them down a rocky slope, and there it was, a narrow stream trickling through the valley, fed by an underground spring. The cattle drank greedily. The men cheered. Clara turned to him, tears in her eyes. "You were right." He smiled. "Sometimes you just have to believe there's something under the dust worth finding." When they returned, John Callahan met them at the gate. For the first time, he extended his hand. "You saved this ranch, son. I misjudged you." Samuel took his hand firmly. "Just did what needed doing, sir." That night, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch watching the stars. The air was cooler, the first hint of rain sending the wind. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "When you stepped off that coach in rags," she said quietly, "everyone thought I was a fool." He chuckled softly. "Maybe you were." She looked up, smiling. "Maybe I just saw what they couldn't." His arm tightened around her. "You saw me when I was down to nothing, and you made me somebody again." Years passed. The ranch grew prosperous, the Callahan name stronger than ever. Folks still talked about the time the mail-order husband showed up in rags, how the whole town had laughed, and how the rancher's daughter had silenced them all by marrying the man who turned dust to gold. But for Clara and Samuel, the real gold wasn't in the land or the cattle. It was in the quiet mornings when they worked side by side, the laughter shared over supper, the love that deepened with every sunrise. Sometimes, when the evening light turned everything soft and golden, Clara would look at him, still the same steady eyes, still the same quiet soul, and think how strange and beautiful life was. How a letter sent into the unknown had brought her not just a husband, but a home. And on the nights when the wind carried the faint creak of the old barn, Samuel would smile to himself, remembering that dusty stagecoach ride, the curious stares, the weight of that first step onto the platform. He had arrived with nothing, but she had seen his worth, and that had made all the difference in the world. For in a land of storms and drought, where fortunes rose and fell like dust in the wind, their love stood firm, simple, quiet, and strong as the oak tree that shaded the porch where they sat growing old together. And long after the years had faded their hair and slowed their hands, the people of Dusty Hollow still told the story of the rancher's daughter who married the man in rags, the man she saw not for what he had, but for who he was. Because sometimes the greatest riches aren't found in gold or land, but in the courage to see a heart's true worth. And Clara Callahan had done just that, and in doing so, had found a love that no drought, no storm, and no passage of time could ever take away.